Welcome to Mystical Messages. I am Hilary Harley, your podcast host. I am an astrologer and Reiki master. Mystical Messages is your podcast gateway to discover and learn about the realm beyond the veil, including all things intuitive, metaphysical, and the healing arts. Today, I am so delighted to have my very special guest, Veronica Shaffer, to join me to understand more about the topic of numerology. I have been looking forward so much to having Ronnie, as I call her, on my show to discuss numerology because it is tied and really the basis, in my opinion, for all the metaphysical healing arts, astrology, and Kabbalah. It's all tied together. So welcome, Ronnie. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here, Hilary.
And I just want to let everybody know that to get in touch with you, to book a session, it's veronicashaffer.com, and that's VERONICASHAFF as in Frank, ER.com. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And your email is V as in Victor, A as in Apple, S as in stop, 4@comcast.net. And they can also contact you via Facebook, Veronica Shaffer, right?
Great. Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. So I want to start with your background. What led you and what helped you discover numerology? What first drew you to it?
Well, my background is I have a degree in as a radiologic technologist. And, of course, I always find that more fascinating now when I look back because it's X-ray, and whether it's CAT scan, MRI, or general diagnostic X-ray, but seeing the inside of a person, what makes what's going on with them medically. My interest, I think, throughout life has always been the question of what makes one tick, and particularly myself. I used to say, what's going on here and why did these things happen?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had gotten a part-time job at a bookstore, and the woman at the bookstore did numerology.
Ah.
And, yes. And it fascinated me. And I mean, I have one of the original books, a book that she recommended, and this goes back to the 1970.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was fascinated with it, but busy, as a mother and raising children and working, things go along by the wayside. And then fast forward, perhaps 20 years later, I had an opportunity to attend a numerology class, and it rekindled that fire. Mm-hmm. And really set me on a path of healing and learning all about Eastern medicine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Were you sick at the time? Did you have an illness? Or no? Because the reason I ask, a lot of people in the healing arts often are awakened or reawakened. They might be introduced to a modality, and then it's during the course of an illness later on that they turn to the modality. So this was introduced to you and then reintroduced to you, and it really felt like your soul was lighting on fire.
Exactly, because then at that particular time in my life, I was a single parent and had 3 little children to raise, and what's all of this about? Why this, and what's the journey ahead of me, and how can this help me? Right. I think I was first more interested in I had that question mark about what's going on with me and how can this help me?
Right. And so if you could briefly explain what numerology is, so that our listeners can understand just a snapshot of what it is.
Okay. It's the practice and the principles of numerology go way back to at least 500 BC, believe it or not.
Wow.
This is when that great Greek mathematician and philosopher Pythagoras began a theory on numbers when he discovered that there was a direct relationship between numbers and music notes.
Mm-hmm.
And so numbers, I found, hold a value, both numerical and spiritual. And in the simplest terms, it's a relationship between a number, its mystical nature, on both the individual and the worldly level. So there's a lot of things that you can do with numbers, and there wasn't much done about it or written about it when actually things began to be recorded more in English until 1907. And the numerological ideas started to become center front. People had an interest. What did they mean in ancient Egypt or China, Rome, Japan, Greece? But it was that Greek philosopher who became what we call the father of numerology.
Okay. And is there a tie to Kabbalah? Because my understanding is that within Jewish mysticism, they use numerology. Are you familiar with that or no?
No, yes and no. The significance of numbers can be seen in religions, like 666 is associated with the beast.
Right.
888 is said to represent Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the Holy Trinity. Hanukkah lasts for 8 nights.
Right.
And in the tarot, each card is numbered, and those numbers have unique meanings. And in the Chinese tradition, the number 4 is associated with bad luck.
Bad luck.
That much. There is a tie-in with the Kabbalah. I just have never really delved deeply into that aspect.
Okay. So that's a conversation for another day and perhaps another guest. So how long have you been practicing, Ronnie?
Practicing in Eastern medicine probably for 25 years.
Wow. Wow. So since the mid to late 90s?
Exactly. Probably maybe a little bit even before. In the beginning, closer to the early 90s. Mm-hmm. And here, even, what I say to people when you think about numbers, and I tell people this is one important thing. We cannot do one thing without a number involved.
That's very true.
You call me on a telephone number. We have a certain time schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that we do in our life is all around numbers. So that's how important they really are.
That's very true because I'm not very math oriented, but I have, astrology is certainly very number based, and thank goodness I don't have to calculate by hand astrological charts. I have a software program that does that, but it is essentially everything is based on numbers. You can't really get out of bed. You pick up your phone in the morning and it tells you if you're on time or late for work or everything like that. So now you talked about Eastern medicine. Do you practice other modalities besides numerology?
Yes, I am also a certified yoga teacher, and I'm a Reiki master teacher, and Polarity practitioner.
Oh, wow.
So what I find, and for all of us, we have opportunities in life, and so when one door opens, we have the opportunity. Do we want to walk through it? Do we want to just look in? Do we want to indulge in what's in that room?
Mm-hmm.
And myself, always being very inquisitive, I went in the room, and it just allowed me these opportunities to open up to more in the Eastern medicine. I think because, I worked at Mass General, and I work in a very large hospital.
Just for our audience, that's Massachusetts General Hospital for anybody listening outside of the Boston area. So what was your work at Massachusetts General?
So I did CAT scan, and then I went into MRI.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'd see these patients, and some of them would come in, month after month, or week after week, and they'd have the same illnesses, and some of them would be getting better, and some of them wouldn't. And so, my sensitivity part of myself always said, well, why? And what else is there out there that would be able to help them?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really where my quest began, to find out what other modalities, in very simplistic terms, Tylenol can take care of my headache. You may need an Excedrin. Somebody else may, a warm cloth is fine, or listen to a meditation. We're all different, but there's something for everyone.
Right. I so appreciate you saying that, because just as we have learned that each child has a different learning ability and capacity and way, whether it's visual learner, tactile, auditory, each of us respond differently to various, varieties of healing. So now I just want to mention, because I think this might be of interest to our audience, you graduated from Johns Hopkins University. Is that correct?
At the hospital, not the university, Johns Hopkins Hospital. That's where I did my training.
Okay. Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. So that's amazing training that you received. And so you've been living in the Boston area for how long?
The Boston area for, maybe 40, 41 years.
Wow.
But having gone, what was hard for me at first when I left the big institution as Johns Hopkins was I went to Greenwich, Connecticut, and there were smaller hospitals, and they were not, and that's not to take from them, but they were not using the latest methods that Hopkins or the bigger hospitals had.
Right.
Usually the bigger hospitals become the experiments,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's passed on. So interesting how I started at Hopkins, and then I ended at Mass General Hospital, and then my retirement. So started large and went back large. Right.
That's very true. So when somebody comes to you for numerology, what do you provide? Do you provide a profile, like a personality profile based on the numbers of their date of birth? How does it work exactly?
Okay, so when they come for me, the first thing I do for them is called the personal year. What's happening to them now? Mm-hmm. And they get a printout on all of this, all right? So we'll talk a little bit about what's going on for them. Mm-hmm. And then there's their birthday number, what that means, their birth. And then there's called the life path number, which is the path that we take in life and what's your identity. Mm-hmm. And then I take their name as it appears in their birth certificate. Mm-hmm. And I bring in what is called you break it down, you do all the vowels, and then that's the soul, and what that comes out to, so that's the inner you. And then you break down the consonants, and that's the outer you, how you appear to the public, to your consciousness. And so you look at both of those, and then you take the combination of both of those, and then that gives you, as I said, the life path. What's your path here? What's your identity?
And so when somebody comes to you, what do they provide for you? They provide their name from their birth certificate and their birth date.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And any other information, or is that pretty much it?
That's pretty much it, because through just that information, I could get all of this information about them. And then I talk about it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
How is it? It's the portrait of the numerology chart.
Mm-hmm.
It's who you are at the core and who you might become if you live to your fullest potential.
Okay.
Similar to astrology, really.
Right. So it's a very in-depth personality profile and also soul path. Is that what I mean, when I've had you do mine, that's what my takeaway was.
Right. And then, as I said, when we do your personal year, which is the year now, 2021, I can also go ahead to, say, 2031.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go back to 2010.
Wow.
So, and then the other important thing is about a number on your birthday. Now, there's some controversy. Everybody has a different way, but the majority of people, when we do this numerology chart, we go from your birthday to your birthday. All right?
What do you mean by that? Do you go from?
Some numerologists like to go from January 1
mm-hmm.
and use that. The majority of numerologists use your birth date.
Oh, I see.
I mean, I'm January 4th, so that's okay for me. But if you're November 10th, what happens is you didn't come into this world until November 10th.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I'm a great example too. I'm in July, so I'm halfway through the year. And
mm-hmm.
So you're using a forecast based on the birth date, say, for example, my birth date, July 14th, from July 14th of 2021 to July 13th of 2022. Is that
right?
Okay.
Or July 14th, birthday to birthday.
Okay.
Yeah, the 13th. So then you look at it because it's a number, but it's a new number.
Mm-hmm.
So like anything that's new, you have a new pair of shoes, you break them in.
Right.
Before you start to feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it peaks up, that number from July 14th
mm-hmm.
will peak up, and you always look at 6 months from July.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes your power number. That's the height of the meaning of that particular number.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That's really...
So
Go ahead.
Even if you don't know your number, and, you don't know numbers, and so yours is, I believe, January is your power month.
Right, correct.
So you just pay attention to what goes on for you around January.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look back, and a lot of people do this, look back over the years, you'll find that a lot of significant things in your life, events, took part around January for you.
Right, the power number month. Right.
Power number month. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So then, once you hit that peak, then after January, the numbers starts to take easier, less energy, down, until then it comes into July 14th of next year and start that brand new number.
Right.
But also to know that in your numerology chart or in numbers, it goes in 9-year increments.
Okay.
Because we always, except in some cases, and I don't want to confuse people, we always take each number, if it's a double number or a triple number, and we reduce it to a single number.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you see after 1 through 9, then you go to number 10 year, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Well, 10 is a 1 plus 0 is a 1. See how that works?
Yep. Now, I actually, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Idiot's Guide series, but I was drawn.
I have heard of those. In fact, I think I have one, believe it or not, you'll laugh, to astrology.
Yes. Well, actually, I have found, so the reason I bring that up is because I've only bought a couple of them, and one of the few that I've bought was the new one on numerology. And what I have found through the few Idiot's Guides that I own is that the publisher finds experts in the field, and whoever wrote the one on numerology really knew what he or she was doing. In fact, I think there were several. There were like 3 co-authors that wrote that one. But I find that they're very well done because, they really take fundamentals and break it down into very user-friendly language and chapters. So, now, if somebody wanted to begin studying numerology, where would they look to find? I mean, do you offer classes, or are there classes in and around, like astrology?
In my area, I do classes. I do them at the high school, at the Braintree High School. This is in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
Braintree, Massachusetts, and Rockland, Massachusetts. And sometimes I can do them if people have called me to come and teach a class.
Okay, so like through adult ed or,
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I know often astrology is offered in various modalities. So that's really good to know that you're available. And are there, like, with astrology, there are chapters. Is there anything like that where you can network with other numerologists, or, how do you network with other numerologists?
I don't at this time. There was, I'll have to look at the name. I used to do a lot of studying in numerology.
Mm-hmm.
And since I'm kind of in a sense of winding down on that studying because, I could be out of the house 3 times a week doing classes.
Right.
But there is a woman in Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
And her name is Doris Ann Bridgehouse.
Okay.
And she wrote a book. She has a wonderful book.
Okay.
And she's a professional numerologist, she's a counselor, and she's very, very good. I did a class with her, and I did a private class with her, and I did a group class with her a while ago. And I bought her book, and I found her book invaluable.
Wow. Okay. And can you spell her last name, please?
Bridgehouse.
Okay, Bridgehouse.
It's called, A Complete Numerology Guide and Workbook.
Okay. That's very helpful because, if you're listening in California or overseas somewhere, I think the best way to do it is just Google numerologists in your, city or town where you're living or your area.
And then I always say, too, you can go on Amazon
mm-hmm.
and look under numerology books and what attracts you, what book is attracted to you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's very true.
But I do say because her book is extremely complete.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a wonderful resource.
Yeah, very good.
So when you're out and about and somebody asks you what you do for work, what is your typical response?
I say I do intuitive counseling.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I kind of like to use that as a broad term.
Mm-hmm.
And energy work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're...
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say you're involved in a number of modalities, so it really depends on your audience that you're speaking with.
And what I do is, if people come to me for, and I don't necessarily want to say a Reiki session, because, I mean, I do a Reiki session, but that also includes all my years of training in polarity, and other. I did at one point, I did a 3-year intensive in Litchfield, Connecticut with Elizabeth Stratton.
Wow.
And what I loved about her, she had a master's degree in Jungian therapy. So we went through all the modalities, but we did a lot of dream work.
Wow.
And that particularly 3-year intensive kind of changed my life and shift my energy, my energetic field.
Yeah, it's remarkable how an intensive class or course of study can really shift on a molecular level, cellular level, how you engage and respond to the world. What is the greatest misconception, in your opinion, about what you do?
I think a big misconception, if we're talking about healing, is that I'm a facilitator. I would love to put my hands on everybody and they are immediately healed. People feel, a lot of people, and years ago, some of my own family members felt if they got on the table and, had a Reiki session, that they would get off and be eternally free of all disease, we'll say. And so with new people, I like to emphasize that ahead of time because I always have them fill out an application, we'll call it a form,
right,
and a diagnostic form. And I try to emphasize to them that, and it's very simple. I say to them, you're the engine. I'm the facilitator.
Yeah.
I'm going to charge your battery.
Yep.
But it's up to you to keep it charged.
That's a great way. That's a very accessible, understandable way of explaining it to people.
Especially, it makes it simple and, not complex because, and that's really, but the key, the last part is, it's up to you to keep your battery charged. Keep that engine going.
Right. So one of the things I always try to ask my guests is what distinguishes you from others in your field. And I knew you practiced other modalities, but if somebody's coming to you for numerology, is that entirely separate? Do you keep that separate and compartmentalized from the Reiki and Polarity therapies?
Well, you know what? There are times, Hilary, I have a flyer, and where I do a half-hour numerology and a reading, and then a half hour on the table for a Reiki session.
Oh.
Now, what I find with that, it can be extremely powerful because first, we're opening your heart, you're opening yourself to listen to what I have to say, about what's going on about you, what the opportunities are that are available for you.
Yeah.
And then I put you on the table and then do the energy work, and you can release all those old energies, those old thought forms, beliefs, and allow yourself to bring in these new opportunities.
Wow. So this is really, you're completely original. I have never run into anybody that combines these modalities like that. And that does really sound incredibly powerful because you're introducing what the person basically is made of and their spiritual connection on a numerological level, but then healing and ushering out anything that's old and invoking and inviting the new. So that's really remarkable. Thank you.
I call it life transforming. I say a new you, a new beginning.
Wow. I'm so glad you shared that with me because I had no idea that that was part of what you offer. So do you remember? Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, so you're given an awareness of tools to keep your body balanced and your spirit uplifted, you know? So you have feelings of peace and security, which is so important, particularly now with all the, you know, the energies flying around in the world. And we want to keep ourselves grounded so we can stay well and healthy.
Yes. No, that sounds like a really miraculous combination of therapies. So I'm so thrilled you brought that up and shared that. Do you recall the first time that you treated somebody or practiced on a client or patient?
Well, let me go back to say before I treated a patient. We did a couple of trying to share wellness days at the hospital, introducing them to all the different modalities: acupuncture, acupressure, you know, polarity, whatever. And so we had a Reiki station. And I can't remember the first person, but my own mind at the time was, gee, I hope this works. I hope they're, you know, feeling good. And so as I started to treat more during that day, it was like I needed to let that go and just be open and have them, though they will take in whatever they want to, and they're ready to release. And so a woman said to me, and I do remember this, because I thought, is it working? Are my hands hot enough? And so one woman said to me, oh, your hands are so hot. And I went inside and I went, oh, good, it's working.
Right.
But now, you know, you don't look. And that's what I find, and I think that this is important. Don't look for complimentary afterthoughts from what you do. If they give it, that's wonderful. But just know that what you've done, you've allowed them an opportunity to connect to that deeper part of themselves through their heart, their spirit, their soul, and whatever their journey is and wherever they are now, they'll be... here's their opportunity to go further. I just had this happen the other day. A woman came to me. I hadn't seen her in 3 years. And she was quite large, and she's on a whole new diet, and, you know, alcohol-free, everything. And she's on the table, and she got off the table, and she said, she was almost screaming. She said, oh, my God, I've never felt this good in my whole life. She came downstairs, and she said, I want to say hallelujah. When she left and was driving the car, going to her car, she said, oh, my God, this is wonderful. But I said to her, I wanted to wheel her back. I said, this is what has happened since you've shifted your energy. But continue to do that.
Right.
And it will only go even deeper. But also know, if you come back to me in another month, every time on that table is a different experience, comparable to what you were ready to let go.
Right. Thank you for pointing that out. I had a yoga teacher who made a point of saying that in one class. I took Kundalini yoga for years and studied with a couple different teachers in the Boston area. And I remember him talking about this one particular student who had a remarkable experience. It was just, you know, different than any other Kundalini class. It was an opening, a heart opening, a soul opening that she experienced during one of the classes. And he said to her at the end, very astutely, I thought, much similar to what you're saying, you know, it met you, the modality met you where you are in that moment. And it's up to you to keep working that, but release any kind of expectation, because she was so high, for lack of a better term. She was so buoyant and lifted by that one particular experience that she thought that this would be the way it would be going forward for each Kundalini class that she was going to take. And he said, kind of hold your horses here. It's like, that it definitely was a soul gateway opening, but, you have to continue to do the work. And you will have other experiences like that, but not perhaps identical.
Exactly. Whereas, as you brought this up, this is a good thing. I had a woman several years ago who got off the table, and again, it's the best thing that ever happened to her. She was thrilled. Okay, can't wait to come back. She comes back the next month, and she gets off the table. She doesn't say much, and that's okay. And she calls me the next day, and she said to me, "What'd you do to me?" I said, "Why? What's going on?" I didn't feel like I did the last time.
Oh, wow.
I said, but what I knew was this time she had gone to a deeper level that she was not ready to look at.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easier to project to the teacher,
right,
than to say, what is going on with me?
Right. Oh, that's so important, Ronnie. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Yeah. I mean, I know with some astrological clients I've had, they want me to basically do the work. And we are the conduits, the facilitators, as you have said. With astrology, I'm holding up a mirror for people to look at. And a lot of times they don't like, the client or the patient doesn't like necessarily what they're seeing, or having to push further into next level of healing. Healing is not always pleasant.
Right.
If you think about, if you skinned your knee, the knee takes time to heal, and it can itch, it can be painful. There are lots of different symptoms around that. And it's the same thing with spiritual healing. It's not all sunshine and roses. So I really appreciate you talking about that. So is there anything that has ever scared or shocked you as part of your work?
Not really. I worked with women in prison.
Oh, yes. Talk to me about that.
Okay. So what I would do is I taught them yoga and meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would do, obviously, the last 10 minutes of the class is do a meditation, a guided imagery.
Mm-hmm.
And I was amazed. They love that.
Mm-hmm.
They love that. And I would ask them if they wanted to share. And so what I found interesting was these women were far more sensitive, far more intuitive than they really realized that they were, and they just have never had that opportunity to connect to that depth. But they allowed themselves to do that in that class. And I used to it just would fill my heart when I'd leave. So
now, do you still work with female prisoners, or?
No, I did it for 5 years, many years ago, and it was not easy to get in. I call myself, not glowingly, believe me, pioneer in introducing yoga to the prisons, because now they're in all the prisons. I'm talking Massachusetts, because I tried to get in, and as soon as I did yoga and meditation, I tried the women's prison, I tried the men's prison in Plymouth County, in Plymouth. I even called a priest and said, when you go in to do meditation, and nobody, it was like everybody shut the door. Nobody wanted to hear about it. And then I But you never know who you're going to meet wherever you go.
Right. That's so true.
So after this was about a year had gone. And I mean, I did and wrote and called. And so I just said, well, guess I'm not meant
Hello?
to do this. So I'm at a part of a holistic bookstore that he had given to his people that had taught there. And this woman sitting next to me, and she said, what do you do? And I told her, and I asked her, what did she do? And she said she was a guard in a prison.
Wow.
I said, well,
wow.
let me tell you.
Wow.
And she said, I will talk to my supervisor who's in charge of the activities for the women,
mm-hmm.
and you have her give her your phone number. So she was right on the ball. I mean, within that week, the supervisor in charge of the women's activities got back to me, and here again, and she said to me, can you take the word yoga and meditation out of the write-up and I said, yeah. And so I put in guided imagery and stretching, and I was then accepted.
Wow. 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 I mean, language is so amazing, and it's so, thank you for sharing that, because I've talked to younger generations of folks, men and women. My daughters, they're in their 20s, and they have a hard time believing how you couldn't call certain things what they were because it just wasn't accepted. And, in the world we live in now, yoga is so integral. There's Lululemon and all these different kind of sportswear and yoga wear. And yoga is so mainstream now, but we forget that it was not so long ago that yoga was considered pretty woo-woo.
Yes, and in the majority of prison systems, the higher ups were all men.
Right.
Are all men, okay? Like you don't often see a male sheriff.
Right.
So anyhow, and back then, that was even harder because I guess they thought maybe I was going to have a cult,
right.
Which is,
right.
yeah.
Right.
Or they would be flying out the windows. I don't know how they get out with the bars on, but, it was just, so it was really interesting. And how then all of a sudden it became acceptable.
Right. It really, it's remarkable how the tide turned with so many different things in the 90s and the early 2000s. It was suddenly, because I remember starting yoga in college in the early 80s, and it was considered groundbreaking that they were even offering a class in yoga. And then by the 2000s, everybody was doing it.
Right.
And so along with that, I want to talk about your work and your experience in hospitals, because I was also offering Reiki. I was a Reiki practitioner on a volunteer basis at one of the major teaching hospitals in Boston. And we've taken a break due to COVID. But now, were you doing this at Mass General in Boston? Or
no, Mass General was the hardest. They still poo-poo. Mm-hmm. Apparently there were a couple, they've accepted that a couple of nurses used to be around to do it. They have their own agenda. But I do know the BI, Beth Israel,
yep,
and Brigham and Women's
mm-hmm.
all have, and Children's Hospital,
mm-hmm.
all have usually a Reiki practitioner or nurses that are on hand and Dana-Farber, for free.
Mm-hmm.
To come to your room if needed, if post-surgery, and even at Children's Hospital, because I experienced this myself when the grandson was in the hospital. If the parents wanted to have Reiki, they would do it on the parents also.
Yes. Yeah, I've heard that about Children's as well. And I know Dana-Farber, which is the major cancer treatment Center in Boston also offers a variety of alternative healing modalities. Because let's be honest, anything that can bring a person to healing is going to improve the numbers. And I may have mentioned this on the show in other conversations I've had with guests, that when I was doing Reiki in ICU settings at the teaching hospital where I was, the ICU nurse would tell me afterward how they could see an improvement in the blood pressure and the various numbers that they were watching as I was doing the Reiki on the patient. So it really, statistically, they've shown the improvement that Reiki and other healing modalities outside of traditional allopathic offerings are able to improve the patient's condition.
Sure. When you stop to think about it, when you meet a person, or you haven't seen a person for a while, an old friend of yours, you usually go and hug them.
Mm-hmm.
And when you hug them, you get that good feeling.
Right. Right.
Or sometimes you've introduced and you shake your hand,
mm-hmm.
and you get a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a healing. That really is, because you're exchanging an energetic exchange of love.
It's so true, Ronnie. That's so true. And, what is really absent from many hospitals across the world is just physical touch,
mm-hmm.
The hands-on healing. And it comes from many, many traditions and backgrounds, not simply religious, but all different nationalities and traditions. Just placing the hands from one person to another in a kind, compassionate way. And it's, I have very mixed feelings about calling it cutting edge when really this is going back to ancient therapies rather than, something that's never been done before. But these hospitals that are integrating modalities from ancient times are considered cutting edge because they offer Reiki or a hand massage or whatever it is.
Yeah, well, stop to think about it. Years ago, when you were a patient in the hospital,
mm-hmm.
the nurse's aide would come in at night, straighten your bed,
mm-hmm.
turn over on your side, and give you a back rub.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that was every single patient. Now, if you didn't want it, you didn't have to have it.
Right.
But that was, and I, a couple of times having been a patient, I couldn't wait for that back rub.
Mm-hmm. Because
it was wonderful.
Yeah, it's also, you think about the blood flow and circulation when you're lying for 24/7. It's really important to have the circulation just from that human touch, the massage capacity, just to get things moving. So it's been such a delight to speak with you. I can't believe we're at the end of our near hour together. I just want to ask, do you have a favorite modality of any of these, or do you just consider them like a toolbox and you know which one to choose?
That's a good question. I consider it a toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
And wherever I'm guided and whatever I do,
mm-hmm.
which I think will be for the well-being and the benefit of the client. I hate that, we get away from that word patient, client. I do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is because of the toolbox. Now, somebody else could be a Reiki master, and they don't have polarity, or they don't have something else, and that's okay. But they bring their own specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
We all bring something that's our own in an energetic way that helps to heal our patients, our clients.
Right. And do you have a favorite among your tools? I mean, that you're partial to, that's like your go-to, or do you consider each one invaluable?
I consider most of them. Obviously, I love numerology.
Mm-hmm.
And I do that, and I use cards. I do, I do card readings. I incorporate that in. The least favorite, and this is me, is tarot cards.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have worked with a friend of mine who does big corporate events where we bring in lots of readers, like maybe 5 or 10 readers for big events.
Right.
And some of them will be specific and say tarot reading, and I know that they really don't understand, the difference.
Right.
And then we have to use the tarot cards, and I go, no, it's not my thing.
Mm-hmm.
But, somebody else would say tarot is my thing, and numerology, numbers don't appeal to me at all.
Mm-hmm.
Or astrology is my strength, and this is where I feel more comfortable. And, so I would have to say my least for me are tarot cards and numerology. And when I do healing sessions, work on them, I'm like the doctor. I bring the tool bag with me.
Right. Right. Depending on what the client need is, whether it's numerology, polarity therapy. And we really didn't get into polarity therapy at all. So we'll have to have a conversation about that another day. But Ronnie, your work is so remarkable. Whether it's individual one-on-one, whether it's group classes that you're teaching, or certainly the prison work that you've done in the past, that really is pioneering. I mean, I know you didn't want to use that word pioneer, but it is pioneering. And it's remarkable that you have done that and shown that it really, how beneficial it is for underserved populations such as that. My last question for my guests is always if you could change the world for better in some way, how would you change it?
I would change it so that we all look at each other as equals and filled with love.
That's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Thank you, Ronnie. So again,
You're welcome.
My guest today has been Veronica Shaffer. You may find her at Veronica Shaffer, and Shaffer is SHAFF as in Francis, ER.com, veronicashaffer.com. Her email is V as in Victor, A as in Apple, S as in Shaffer, 4@comcast.net, or Facebook, Veronica Shaffer, listed on Facebook.
Hilary, thank you for having me.
It's
a pleasure.
It's been so delightful to speak with you. I could talk to you for hours and hours, Ronnie. I really could. So next time
we'll come down for a visit.
Yes, I will come down to the South Shore the next time I'm around Boston. But that brings us to the end of this episode of Mystical Messages. And I invite all my listeners to please join me again in 2 weeks when I will bring you my astrology forecast for the upcoming month. I thank you so much for tuning in and listening to today's show, and I wish you many, many blessings forward. Thank you very much.